Sure. Okay, I think we're live. Hi, Jill. How are
Yay.
you?
Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Good, good. I'm so glad you were willing to join us today. This is the Pointing It Out podcast, and I'm so glad everyone found us on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please hit subscribe because that helps other people find us, and it seems like people who have found us are really loving it. So
That's great.
yeah. So I was thrilled you were willing to join us. So I will give the quick introduction of you, but you're probably better at introducing yourself. But this is Jill Lakes. She is a store owner, a distributor of canvases, a distributor and dyer of thread. She just does everything fabulously as far as I can tell. So
you're so sweet.
Thrilled to have you. And I'm not sure if we've ever met in person.
You know, I'm sure we have because we've been at markets together, right?
And because I have your line, but when I first brought it in, I only brought in, because I'm in this little tiny old house that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
I brought in like 30 or 40 colors to start with.
Right.
And then when I was here all by myself, I was like, you know what? I'm making room for the whole line because I love it. So
the whole line, right?
Yes. So mine's behind me. Mine's more vertical. Yours is more horizontal.
Right.
And, I'm thrilled to have them all. And so I know that I worked with someone in your booth, but I don't think it was you when I was picking out my 30 colors. And I'm sure I drove them crazy because they're probably like, just buy them all, lady. And
right. Well, you know, there's the most popular ones, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the interview, but you know, I think it's always best. I tell people, let's get you started with the ones that I know you're going to be pulling all the time. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's where I started. But then when I was here by myself, and I'm like, you know, everyone else was sitting at home shopping. I was shopping for the store too. So fun. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your family, your background, what you've done with yourself before needlepoint.
Well, I'm married to a great guy named Dan.
Nice.
And I am a late in life mom. I have a 12-year-old.
It's crazy.
And we live not far from the shop here in the Northwest, just north of Seattle, in a town called Edmonds. Right. And that's where the shop is located now. I graduated with a clothing and textile degree, which I'll kind of just roll on into the other things that I've done. Right after college, I moved to Manhattan and got a job on 7th Avenue with a designer. Wow. And worked there for a few years, living in the city, which was amazing, especially being in my early 20s. It was just a great time. And then that company moved me to Los Angeles, and I did a showroom there for them in the Northwest, in the Los Angeles market. And then it rolled into a job with fabric companies. And so I worked for a representative of fabrics, and then I started my own repping company, which I represented a mill out of Italy, a mill out of Germany, and also a mill out of South Carolina. Wow. So that was kind of my start of my career with textiles, which is really my love, is fabrics. And then I moved back to the Northwest to be close to family again, because I was raised here in the Northwest. And my mom at the time, she was an avid stitcher, an avid needle pointer. And she's like, I think I want to open a store. There's not a store here. And I'm like, okay, I think you could do this. So I helped her launch what's known as the Needle Pointer, which is my store. And then I left the business after it had been established for a few years. And in 99, she, so that was 1993. So in 99, she said to me, I want to retire with your dad. And so I'm going to close the business. What, do you think that you want to take it over? And I thought about it. I was at the time working for a company doing acoustical wall treatments, again, using my fabric knowledge and that kind of thing, but doing a little bit more of the architectural interior design work. And I really loved doing that. It was a great company to work for, but I thought, man, to own my own company again and my own business again, I wanted to do that. So I'd been with her in the beginning, so it was an easy slide back into the business. And then, so that was 1999, and this is 2020. So
Wow.
21 years later. So
Well, I have a daughter that works for me a little bit here and there, and I keep joking and saying, you know what, when I want out, you're my retirement plan.
Right, exactly.
Just looks at me and thinks, I don't know, but at some point it might be right for both of us. You never know.
Right. And my daughter has had a lot of fun downstairs playing store as well, so it would be nice. But I want her to kind of flap her wings. I loved doing that in my early 20s. I think it's important. And then, this is a good spot to land eventually, maybe.
Right. Who knows?
Yeah. So then in 2013 was really the year that a lot of changes happened for me in my business. I was looking for other opportunities. And in 2013, I met Jennifer Tan. Jennifer Tan is the designer of Pippin Studio Designs.
Okay.
And we always laugh. She lives right up the road. Well, she lives in British Columbia. So yes, kind of up the road, but 3-hour drive.
And a little border in between.
Yes, exactly. And so she and we just started a friendship, and I said to her, if you ever want US distribution, I would be happy to do that for you. And she was doing everything. She was doing her own painting, her own marketing and all of that. So, and it was also in 2013. Now I will get to the story that starts this.
Well, the Pippin part's interesting too, because I don't think I realized that she was Canadian.
Yeah.
And a little fun fact about Detroit. Detroit is the only place that has any property north of Canada.
Right. It curves around, right?
So anyways, that's neither here nor there. But I have a lot of Canadian customers because we are so close to Canada, and there just aren't a lot of Canadian needlepoint resources, at least this side of the Mississippi. Not that the Mississippi goes that north, but you get my drift.
Right. There isn't. I think that's a good thing to tell your Canadian customers too about Pippin, because she's Canadian. So it's a fun connection to have.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Yeah.
So so you might be able to identify with this. In 2013, I had a customer, very good customer, that but she always had these great ideas for me. Do you have customers that have great ideas for you?
Yeah, push the envelope for all of us, which is good.
And we treasure these customers. Don't get us wrong, but when you're wearing 15 different hats a day, right? And she came in, and we were just about ready to have our let's see, it would have been our 20-year anniversary.
Okay.
Right. I lose track of time. Sorry. And she said to me, I have found this knitting fiber, this knitting yarn that I think she's pointing to me, I think, you, Jill, should skein it up and sell it here in the store. And I'm like,
story, so this is very familiar, because I don't know if everyone knows this, that my shop is also a knitting shop. I'm half knitting and half yarn. And so this yarn you're talking about, we were doing that too. Now, I'm not as smart as you. I just do it for my own little customers, and I stopped there. You are taking it big, because you're smarter than
me. So this conversation, I turned it around, because I'm like starry-eyed, right? I'm like, I've got a young child at home. I'm thinking, and I said, Faye, this is a great idea. I think I will hire you to skein it for me, and then we'll sell it in the shop. And she kind of thought about it, and she's like, oh, okay. So it was our anniversary party, and she had skeined it in really long strands, very dramatic strands, right? And she had, I paid her for what, we made out a business arrangement, and we sold it at the anniversary party. Now, I want you to know, I hadn't tried it out yet. I had not put needle to thread.
I'm going to show
to
you
canvas.
mine. I didn't think about this, but I still have some. Mine's sitting right here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Right, that,
That's
and
how
so
we did
this,
ours.
but this was even before they were doing that.
No, this we did in shop.
Okay, that's your
So
own
we did
card.
it. We did not do it the long way. This is
We did it.
There we go.
Got
There's
it.
the wooden floss on the bottom.
Perfect, right?
But it looks much, much better the way you do it now. But anyway.
Well, the little, where you can kind of.
Yes.
So we sold it all during our anniversary party event, and it was the following week, and it was quiet time in the store. And I remember saying, you know what, I'm going to sit down. I've got a piece of canvas, doodle canvas, and grabbed my needle and sat down for a few minutes. And I remember laughing hysterically as my needle is going through the canvas and I'm stitching with this. I had never had anything so luxurious feeling. I'm a tactile person. For me and my stitching, it has to make me feel good. So wool doesn't feel good to me. It's a feel thing for me. Some people relate to it and some people don't. But I just remembered laughing, thinking, oh my, I just was captivated. So then I called the manufacturers, the dyers of that, and said, you know what I think you should do, right? So I took the conversation to him and I said, I think you should skein this out and sell this to needlepoint shops. There's a market here.
Right.
And he said, no. He said unequivocally no. And I said, well, I said, I think you're missing the mark. And he said, I think you should do it. So this is number 2 person that tells me that I should do this.
Fingers.
So I said, okay. So I started getting, buying his yarn and their yarn and scanning it out. And I called all my buddies that I knew in the, other shop owners. And I said, okay, I'm doing this. Are you in? And they're like, yes, we're in. So I was reminiscing this morning on talking about this part of my story. I used to buy these cake boxes. So if you think about those big flat white cake boxes that you get right? I would buy those because we skeined them out much longer than this, almost twice as long in the beginning.
Okay.
And we laid them out in these cake boxes and they're super light. This fiber doesn't weigh much. I was thinking about how that we would take them from, I would take them from the house up to the shop, which was just 1,000 square feet, a tiny store. And we would have them all in these cake boxes. And if one of the cake boxes let loose, anyway, I was just reminiscing. It was fun to talk about this, but that's what we started with. And there were some other turns of events that brought me to now dyeing it. But really, it was the blessing of being in this small little industry is how we know each other and we support each other in this business through good and bad times. And Tracy from Planet Earth called me and she said, Jill, you can dye this. You can dye this in your kitchen over the weekend. And I said, Tracy, I love you so much, but I'm not dyeing this in my kitchen over the weekend.
She's one of the biggest people out there. Like, she's like, it's no big deal. Just do it. Like, she has such a great attitude.
Right. So the long and the short of it is, I ended up dyeing it in my kitchen during the weekdays. So I did. I started in my kitchen. I was able to buy it undyed, natural.
Right.
And I'm self-taught. I understand the basis of dyeing, but to actually then now step through the hoops of learning how to actually do this, that was all new to me. And I read a ton and I asked a ton of questions and, tapped into that fearless side of like saying, okay, okay, let's see what this is about. And so I think I started with maybe about 24 colors. And again, I was doing it, I have just a normal range at home, right? 4 burners, but only 2 of my pots will fit on the 4 burners. I could only accommodate 2 pots. And so I promised my family that I wouldn't poison them. So it was always my pledge to have all the mess cleaned up, and in the, I had these big tubs had all my equipment and everything in these big tubs. And so I would, unload in the morning. I'd get Sam to kindergarten, because I think she was in kindergarten that year that I started this. So I'd race her up to kindergarten, and I had my team at the shop was fabulous. They were handling the whole retail side of life, and I'd run home and soak the fiber and try to do, I'm trying to think how many batches. I think that if I dyed 8 hanks in a day, and a hank looks like this.
Ooh, isn't that?
This is, I'll talk about this later, but this is about the size of a hank. And I think if I could do 8 of those in a day, I was pretty tired. I mean, because you have to, it's a heat. So my dyes are all natural. They're all mineral based. I learned a lot about dyes and where does dye come from, and how does it actually adhere to the fiber. And mine is through a heat setting process. I actually do either vat dyeing, what I call my vat dyeing, which is done in a 20-quart pot. Something you'd cook your marinara in, but it's 20 quarts, so it's pretty big. And
true confession, when you hear vat, that I went to school in New Orleans.
Okay.
When I was in college, and that's what they served at the fraternity parties.
Oh, that's.
Now I can call it like jungle juice or.
Oh, right.
We called it vat, and all the girls knew, like, you don't drink too much vat or you'll get into trouble. So.
Don't be drinking the vat. No.
I never did. I think I did it once and learned my lesson, as most college kids do, right?
That's going to stick with me for quite a while as I'm dying. I want you to know that.
Ours was usually red. So just think of it when you dye your red threads.
Right. Exactly. Okay. I will. It looks so tempting, doesn't it? So I do that. And then I also do hand dyes, which is actually laid out on a tray. And I hand apply the dye to the fiber. And that's what you see in a lot of the, we have now, I don't have these re-tagged, but so you can show them that. So this last year,
this would be your vat dye, because
that's vat dyeing, correct.
Tonal as a knitter, I would call it tonal rather than variegated. And this would be the red tags.
Yep.
Would be your hand dyes, which have a lot more variegation.
Right.
There. Now you can kind of see all the variegation. I mean, they're just unbelievable.
And I have to mix up to, 4 different colors of dye to apply on one of those. So that, I think, is tree bark that you had. Is that tree bark?
You know your colors, my dear. Sure is.
Yeah. So, and you have to remember, it started right here in this room with me. So, so that I mix 4 different dyes, and some dyes have multiple colors in them. Right. So I have all the, the formulas for that. So it's more time consuming, and then I'm applying that, hand applying that.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and the others that you have, the tonal ones, they call it more of a tea. I think I'm trying to remember the term, but where I put it in the vat and I don't touch it.
Gotcha. So
what happens is, if you think of dye in a container, if you think of dye as like a moving thing in there, and then you add your fiber, this dye is going to head to the fiber. So if you think of them as little living things, I always imagine them heading to the fiber, and there's going to be groups of where they attach, more of them attach, or some of where the fiber's settling in, and it'll be darker in areas and then lighter in areas. So if I want a consistent color, then I'm going to create movement in the vat to make sure that the fiber is continually moving in the vat. So some of the colors I do, I try to, if I really want that light color, I'm going to move this camera just a little bit. See the orange, right? The lightest one over there. So in order to get that to be that color, I make sure that that's continually moving in the vat, so that the dye is evenly dispersed throughout the entire hank.
So it's a very active process. Like you're not just sticking it on the stove and walking away and doing laundry.
I am not. I have timers going and buzzers. I consider it almost a dance in here in a way, because I'm soaking the fibers, I'm filling the vats, I'm measuring and wetting out the dye, and I've got different timers going on. If I arrive to work without my watch, it's a bad day because I've got timers on my iWatch, and so yeah.
So we haven't talked about, though, which I think you and I kind of take for granted, but many people are not aware of, is the base fiber is obviously silk, but let's talk about the makeup of it, because I think it's really fascinating.
It is. It's if you go ahead and anybody at home has it and you kind of shred the end of it, you'll see that there's very tiny silk threads that are laid side by side.
Crazy.
And then it's I'm trying to remember the actual term, like non-degummed fiber. So that means the gum is still part, and that's what creates the crispness in it. Okay. So if you think of starch, when we starch a shirt, or even when we press canvases again and the heat activates that starch that's in the canvas and creates that crispness and that firmness. And this is similar to that with the fiber, but as you stitch it, it starts to soften and can be something totally different as it's going through the canvas. Is that what you were kind of?
Yeah, because this may or may not be right. I'm putting myself out there with maybe saying I don't know what I'm talking about, but I always tell people it's just like stitching with like a 12-ply silk, except for they're all nice little next door neighbors.
Exactly.
All
exactly.
And good little soldiers.
Right. And then if you ply it out, you can do that. And it kind of changes the color, because you'll notice that my dye is, when you look at it, it almost dilutes the color because the dye isn't getting in between those soldiers.
Okay.
Right. And so when you ply it out, this side of the fiber, and it's so tiny, it kind of dilutes it out. So if you ply out like coal, for example, you'll get a really beautiful charcoal gray. It won't be as solid black as the coal.
Because is the base fiber like a off-white, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, it's a natural. It's actually Cirrus Cloud. Do you have the Cirrus Cloud? I'll grab mine.
Oh, it's right here.
Okay, there you go.
Because you have a couple of whites, so I didn't grab polar bear by accident.
So Cirrus Cloud is the base color.
Oh, it's whiter than I would have anticipated.
Yes, and then and that's why I didn't really run after a white until recently. Then I ran after I developed polar bear then, and that does go through the dye process.
Yeah, because it's like, it's just barely different, but so fabulous.
Yeah, but just enough. So if a person really wanted to have more of a white.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, it's one of the most versatile threads in the shop, because I'll pick it up occasionally to a newer stitcher or someone who hasn't seen your thread. And they'll be like, oh, no, I don't want something with that much texture. But I say, but wait.
Right. Exactly.
And
exactly.
Just show them, and I don't know how you introduce it to people, but I would say, just put your little thumbnail next to your pad of your finger and just run it down there. They're like, oh, and then, and then. And I think it's better for you to talk about all the then and thens, but that's how I usually introduce it to people, because I'm like, it doesn't have to be crunchy, but it's great that it can be like have all that.
Right. Well, and I guess I find when I'm stitching with it, I lay most of my stitches, Melissa. So I'm kind of taking, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. They just seem to, and I lay with my finger. I don't lay with a
I'm the same
fancy
way.
tool.
Yeah, I cheat too.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, isn't that the beauty of stitching, is that it's kind of whatever feeds our own, each soul. Like, I mean, I have some people that their soul is only fed if they've got all the tools, right?
Right.
And I'm like, that's good for them. Me, I'm like, you know, I'm using my thumbnail and, you know, so, and then I know some people that actually run it through one of those really small,
Hair flatteners, the ceramic.
the flat iron type thing. Now, the thing to be careful with silk, any silk, is if you overheat it, it could lose its luster. And that's the same with my dyeing process. If I overheat the fiber, if for some reason it's not really boiled, but it steams.
Right.
If it steams at a too high of heat for too long, I have to keep it. That's also part of the process, is keeping the temperature. So I do warn stitchers about doing too much of the flat ironing process.
Right.
You could remove some of the luster.
But what I think is interesting with that is, and again, like I'm throwing this out there, that my little layman's experience with this is, my first step is I flatten it like that. And then it seems like if you give it a quick run through the flattening iron, it actually gets shinier.
Yep.
But then
Yeah,
it sounds to me like if you did it too slowly,
right.
that's where you're in trouble.
That's where you're in trouble. Just watch your heat. That's the heat is the key. So if you have it a lower heat, you can get it to that smooth, satiny, that beautiful. It really looks like, when you lay those strands side by side, it looks like satin.
Well, and the first time I ever used it was in a class at Market with Susie Valerie. Like, the fact that I even remember this so distinctly. And it was a turquoise color. It was probably Glacier.
Okay.
On an Associated Talents rabbit.
Yes.
And I had never used it before. And I was like, holy, it looks like I just laid splendor with the most expensive laying tool that ever was. And all I did was do some Scotch stitches, and I was hooked. Absolutely.
Oh, that just makes me so happy. It's a beautiful fiber. I just feel so blessed to have it, and, you know, just being able to dyeing it. And it's just, and again, like what it does, like you're just saying about it, it goes where you tell it to go to, and it behaves nice, and then you end up with this beautiful sheen or beautiful texture, or whatever you really want it to be.
Yes. Now, are you the only dyer?
I am right now.
So nothing better ever happened to you, Missy. You can't run off to Hawaii or any of those things.
Well, you know, exactly. I have talked to one of my gals. I have a beautiful team downstairs that handles my my retail space. I mean, I'm back and forth. So
downstairs is your retail store, and on the second level is your dyeing studio. Is that right?
So yeah, so in 2016, as this business was growing, and I could hardly handle doing all the dyeing in my kitchen. Right. I started looking for a building to bring everything. I had the Pippin canvases, and I had the inventory supply of the straw in some work studios, or, you know, workspace, office space. And so between my house and the shop up in Everett, and then the workspace, and then my daughter at school, I was, you know, racing in between vats, you know, of dyeing, and it was just time to kind of bring it all under one roof.
Nice.
And so we're very blessed. We found a building in Edmonds, and so we moved the shop. I totally remodeled this building. It was a dance studio. Oh. And so it was upstairs. I have like 1,900 square feet, and we put a wall in between. So I have a lovely studio here, and I think you and I talked about that at some point when I'm back doing the dyeing again, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that it would be fun to have your viewers come in, and we would do some dyeing here. Oh my God. So yeah, and so then we pulled the shop is downstairs, and I was able to create a lovely new space to have classes, and, you know, because we were about 1,000 square feet. Wow. So now we've got big space and lots of room, and can have, when we're back, everybody's traveling again, we'll get back to all of our activities. So,
Yeah. So you have, so in that realm, historically, you have had like demonstrations there on site. Is that what you're saying?
So yeah, so during some of our on-site events, I've invited the gals to come up, and I give them a small piece of straw, a small little skein, if you will, and I've mixed up dye, and I kind of show them what I do. So they can kind of see what I do and kind of experience what the process is, and they've really loved it.
Oh, I
They
bet.
really have enjoyed the process. So we don't do the vat dyeing, I just have them do the hand dyeing and get, glove everybody up and throw aprons on them, and so it's been
So when
fun.
you do the hand dyes, like, because again, I'm a knitting shop owner, so we have a lot of hand dyed yarn.
Right.
And there's certain vendors that when the color comes back in, the dye lots are very, very similar, and others not so much. Yours seem to be pretty darn good. So how are you controlling that? I think that's amazing.
So I have very meticulous recipes that I've kept very tight. Your dye is going to be influenced by the dye itself. I have had dye come in from the dyer, one that it visually looks different. I mean, it says it's brown color number whatever, but I'm looking at the 2 cups of dye, one that's I'm probably almost out of, and I've replaced it with one very different. But remarkably, when I use it in the formula, it's pretty good. So I really give kudos to my dye company that they're keeping, and they did tell me, if you run across something that doesn't look right, let us know. The only one that I ran into problems with was the dye stuff for mocha and latte. That original dye varied. So when I first did it, it had almost a reddish tone to it, and pinkish. It's hard for me to explain, but I think, and then when I got a replacement dye, it was very brown. So that was, but then they went back to their original dye stuff. So the dye that I get will influence that greatly. And then also the amount of that's on the skein or hank, if you will, that comes from the mill itself. If it's too much that will influence how the dye will adhere to that. So if I can keep those controlled, if I can be consistent with the size of hank that's coming in from the mill, then my formulas are they're gonna be close. So, and then of course, then it's me, I am measuring, I've got these little digital scales, and I'm measuring out the dye meticulously to the 1/100th of a gram.
Wow.
Right. So that's the control there, is trying to be consistent with that. But there's factors that I don't have any control over. So it's just that balance between the two. So.
Sure. And how many colors do you have now?
I made Sam count because I couldn't remember. I have 101 colors.
Okay, I was going to say it was 103, but I think I had 103, and then Blue Danube got discontinued, and another one. So
Blue Danube there was one more, I think.
Yeah, because at one point I thought it was 103, and then George was like, no, we don't have that anymore.
And then I think then the last market we were at, I did bring on a new color, but then with everything that's going on with the mills right now and everything, we've just, we're just waiting to go forward with new colors. But I mean, I do have some things that you just tell me where we are with time, Melissa, because you had asked about what if I had any things on the docket, and I'd be happy to share some of these.
Let's end with that, but I do think that there's as with 2020, there's
Yes.
things and bad things. One of the bad
Right.
things for many, many people right now is the supply chain issue.
Yeah.
And getting things from overseas and. So I'm
Yeah.
sure this is affecting you just like it's
Yes.
affecting so many of my other vendors. So share a little of that with us.
So I think it really is hard for people that are at home and maybe that aren't part of a business world to understand what's happening with our supply chain. And I can't tell you the whys of it. I just know that it's happening.
Well,
And I mean, the whys are that COVID has thrown everything into a tailspin. And is it a total, domino effect, the whys of it, I would hope that everybody would kind of want to get back to work and, let's get back to what we've been. But I think that there's just some kinks in the chain that are just really having a hard time unkinking. And that's what's happening here. The mills in China are not at capacity. They are not producing like they were in pre-COVID.
right.
I think it's going to be a slow startup. And I know that a lot of the other thread companies are feeling the effects too.
For sure.
So right now I'm out of a lot of colors. I am keeping just knowing what you as a shop owner, you mostly sell. And I know that was one of the questions was like, well, what's your top sellers? I am making sure that I continue to stock the greens and mostly the browns. And when I say that, I've got actually the list of my top sellers, and those are the ones that are getting any undyed fiber that I have left. Those are what I'm dyeing so that I can make sure we have those to sell, because we're going to sell those. We'll sell all of them eventually, but those are the top colors. So.
Right, because they lend so
Yeah.
well to nature and things in our,
Yes,
baskets, trees,
grass, exactly, all of that. So those are, and I think really those are the ones that will continue in this line to be. They just marry right into those subject matters on the canvas.
Right.
And I was thinking actually yesterday and today we've really had a change of seasons here, and all those. This is my inspirational time for dyeing. I see these colors that are coming out in these trees, and I just want to start mixing dye and doing R&D and, coming up with these, these deep red russets and these rich plum colors, and I want to mix them together on a hank of silk, and, so I can't wait to get back to my R&D.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the little thing that I just realized we forgot to talk about for people that are newer to experiencing your thread. We talked about straightening it, flattening it, not overheating it. But the fact, people, like, their eyes practically pop out of their head when I say, well, and then if you want lighter coverage, you can just rip it in half. And they're like,
right.
What?
Right. You can strand it out, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. So that's doesn't really fit into where we are in this discussion, but I think that's such an important thing for people that are new to your thread to know. It is just so incredibly versatile. So
yeah, it is so versatile, and actually I didn't really discover that. I remember a conversation I had with Vicki at Needle Nook. She's the one that really brought that to my attention. She goes, I just strand this stuff out, and I'm like, you do?
You can do that?
And then Laura Taylor and I'm like, that's great.
Well, I had a call earlier today with my BFF Megan at the Needlepoint Clubhouse that I do this production with, and we were talking about something on an Instagram Live about how I was going to do this as a wine coaster. I said, but I think you're the one who introduced me to it because you said it could stand on its side. She's like, oh, no, I said it could stand on its side. You must have figured out the wine coaster part. So I'm like, well, we're better together. That's all there is to it.
We are all better together, right? Because, we each think of these little things, but together we all come up with these really fabulous ideas. So it makes it. My BFF we always feel like, we share one brain cell. And so some days I have it and the other day she has it.
I like that. I like that. So, so we've talked a little bit about how you're stocking your best-selling colors. So when your supply chain gets back up to speed, is there a new plan? What's going on?
Yeah, the new plan, I've got plans. I think the Georgia, who does the shipping that you talk to when you place your orders, and she's just fabulous. She knows what she's going to do, and I know what I'm going to do, and we'll just be dying basically round the clock to get it all back up to speed again. But I do have some R&D that I did probably was it earlier this year or the end of last year. I start to lose track of time, but I will show you. So can you see this okay, Melissa?
It's glorious.
Okay, so these are all hand dyes that so after one of our events here, and I had all this extra dye that was around, and I started to play, because my over dyes are more of the natural colors, and I really wanted to do some blues. And then I have a beautiful purple, which includes the blue purple and the red, more violet purples.
So those are future colors that will come on little tiny cards at some point, right?
Yes, and then this was really more of kind of the inspiration from what's happening now. I've got reds and oranges on this.
It was a glorious sunset. That's what I see.
Right? I love that. I love that. And then this was from a while ago that I did, but I love these gold colors.
So pretty.
Right?
Really, really pretty.
And one more to share is these greens.
Oh, isn't that fun?
Isn't that fun? So.
Super. That's spring right there.
Yep. Yes, very much so.
So how do you come up with your color names?
I use my team. We usually we have Wednesday morning meetings, and I'll bring my big skeins of fiber down after they dry, and I lay them in the room, and I say, okay.
Brainstorm.
and then sometimes, I think one time we were having a retreat, and I let the customers, fill out a list of their ideas and stuff, and somebody got a prize for I think Lime, I know, and Irish Eyes. Those were two that came from customers.
Very fun.
So I love using other people's ideas for the names.
That's super great. I always say,
I think my daughter came up with Goldilocks and Mermaid. Those two names were.
I think your daughter should have a little say here and there. I think that's
well, yeah, she's sitting at the counter. She's in the trenches with me. So I thought those were great names.
Good. Well, these are probably really good like math lessons for her. Like people don't realize how much like math and science goes into like our little crafting.
It's so true, right? I mean, when you're calculating how much fiber you're going to need to cover a person's canvas and stuff. I mean, I don't dare pull thread without a calculator. My goodness.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Oh, well, good. Well, if we covered everything, do you think? Anything else?
I think so. I was just trying to think if there were any other questions that you had for me that I'm looking at the list. I think we've kind of gone through most of it, and this has just been such a pleasure, and I was just so thrilled that you asked me to join you. And I know Megan's not here, but she's you and Megan.
I have to tell you, Lily, she's the one who says one of us, when we have a huge list, I have to say, because we get so excited. Like we both just love everything about this industry. But she was the one who said, one of us has got to get with Jill. And I'm like, I'm on it. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me and including me.
Oh, our pleasure. And I threw out to her your idea of, 6 months, 9 months from now, whenever you're in a really good position to do it, of a dyeing demonstration. And I think that's amazing.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. It would be great. I've been kind of wondering, like, okay, so, you know, how could we do this? I was setting it up and in my head. So I'll just
Right.
keep noodling on that, and we'll look forward to putting that on the calendar once the supply chain gets ironed out. And I can't wait to tell you that it's all figured out.
I know. Well, if that's our biggest problem that's on our plates right now, we're in pretty good shape. Right?
You are right. You are right. So,
Well, good. Well,
great.
thank you so much for spending time with me. And if people want to look at all your colors, you've got a website, right?
Yep. silkroadfiber.com. It's not with the S. I think it's just silkroadfiber.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Good.
yeah.
Good. So, and you know, there's lots of shops like me that have the full line. So if people are fortunate enough to have a local needlepoint shop, go in and check out their glorious wall. I just, like I said, couldn't be happier. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
And
thank you, Melissa.
we'll talk to you soon, my dear.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.